All right, we're going to get started. Welcome everybody to Crafting Your Career Journey. We're really excited to have you all join us. Wherever you are in that career journey, we have lots of stories to share today, some unique perspectives from Propeller consultants that we're going to share today. So over the next hour, you'll hear 5 unique perspectives. We'll have some Q&A, so you'll be able to ask your questions. But our goal is to hopefully provide something valuable for you by the end. So no matter where you are in that career journey, whether you're an MBA student or you have 20, 30 years of experience and you're looking for that next step, I think you'll find something extremely valuable with all these unique perspectives that we're going to share today. So here's a quick look at what we're going to cover. I do want to introduce our facilitators for today. Jody Nelson is our recruiting manager, and she will be talking a little bit about Propeller, what we do. And our other facilitators are our talent acquisition leads, Julia Ryan and Dory Grant, will be handling a lot of the Q&A with the panelists and also introducing themselves for some potential one-on-one informational interviews at the end if you want to explore more about Propeller or consulting in general. So we'll provide some next steps for that at the end. One thing to know about the panelist roundtable Q&A, where we will be spending a majority of our time. We had a quick pivot. We are going to keep everybody in one room instead of the breakout rooms. So we'll alternate between panelists. So you get that unique perspective. So you'll be able to hear everybody's story. And then we'll reconvene at the end and share some resources. We have a quick guide to help you in your next journey in your career, how to interview well, how to nail that interview, how to prepare yourself, skills, all that kind of fun stuff. And then look at some current openings here at Propeller that might pique your interest, as well as explore opportunities for some one-on-one follow-up with Julia and Dory. So I would like to invite Jody Nelson to share a little bit about Propeller and introduce our panelists.
We're excited to see so many faces on the Zoom today. Just a little bit about Propeller and how we do business and what we do before we launch into our panelists. So as a management consulting firm, we've been around since 2012, so coming up on 10 years next year. We have more than 150 employees now. We're growing very rapidly, which is very exciting for us. And we're locally based, which means that we primarily work with clients that are also based in one of our geographies. Means that we also have a strong presence in our local community. It also means we don't require our consultants to travel. And so this locally based aspect of the way that we do business is very important to us. In terms of where those locations are, we have offices in 4 locations. So Portland, which is where I'm based, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and Denver. And then, just some of the other things that differentiate Propeller in terms of how we do business is that we're industry agnostic, which means that we work with clients in all sorts of industries. We work with global retailers, we work with healthcare companies, we work with technology companies, utilities, like everything in between. And so this gives our consultants a really rich experience to be able to take lessons they've learned with, a healthcare client and bring them to, a retailer or whatever it might be. We're also employee owned, which we have an employee stock ownership program, which is something that is a great financial benefit for our employees, but I think more importantly, it speaks to the way that we collaborate and work together. We want all of our employees to think like owners because in fact, all of our employees are partial owners. And then we are very engaged in the community. So that kind of goes hand in hand with being locally based, like I talked about. We do a lot in our community, not just planting trees like you see in the photo there, but we do a lot of pro bono consulting for community or nonprofits and so forth. So that's a little bit about Propeller and who we are as a company. And then I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have 5 wonderful panelists for you today. And they've been here for different lengths of time and have different backgrounds. And so this is going to give you that diverse perspective that we hope that you're going to learn something from. So each of the panelists will be introducing themselves in a little bit more detail, but just to kind of give the quick synopsis, Rosie van Horn is one of our consultants here in Portland. Serena Klein started as a consultant in Portland, but is now a director with us here at Propeller. Then we have Brianna Aguero, a consultant based in Silicon Valley. Lisa Payne, who is a consultant in San Francisco. And then finally, Martin, who's a consultant in Denver. So we are very excited to have our 5 panelists here today. And with that, I will invite them to start with their kind of more in-depth introductions. So I think we will start with Rosie.
It always takes me a minute to take myself off mute, but hello, everyone. You'd think I'd be ready to unmute after, 2 years working from home, but here we are. So I always feel like I have to preface this of like, my career story is so weird, but that's the whole point, is crafting those weird experiences, telling a story with it, and getting the career of your dreams, which is where I'm at right now. I love this company, but I'll start out with my journey. So my first experience started with Evergreen Aviation. They also own like Evergreen Helicopters, Evergreen Vineyards. They were a huge company, but I worked as a receptionist at first. And in every role, I kind of did what I did with this receptionist role, which was I complete the job checklist. You answer your phone calls, you take messages. But I also created a training and onboarding program for future candidates. I created a knowledge base with support articles and best practices and glossary terms. And I basically have rinsed and repeated that same cycle, finding the gaps that need to be filled and finding the things that don't fit quite right and can be optimized. So at Evergreen, I also did sales and marketing. So learned how to talk to people, how to read the room, but also program and project management. Also at Evergreen, I was a financial analyst. So learned a lot about analysis and optimizing current workflows, but also learned that I do not want to major in finance. So that was a big learning lesson for me. But after I left Evergreen, I moved to Mexico, where I created a nonprofit organization in partnership with the local universities and churches for like an after-school program to help the local dropout rates from grade school to high school. And that also helped me realize that I like to do work that is engaging, but also feels meaningful to me. And after I graduated from OSU with my communications degree, I moved on to Ruby, which was a company that I hunted down for literal years. I hunted them down. I wanted to work there. Back in 2012, they were the best company to work for, like the #1. And that's when I found them. And when I joined them, they were just starting to ideate and think about their bilingual offering, because at the time they were hanging up on thousands of bilingual callers, which, it doesn't feel like a good thing to do, but also they just didn't have the structure. They didn't have a way to route calls to bilingual receptionists. They didn't know how to grow the offering. So I had a literal elevator pitch where I jumped into the elevator with the CFO and told him, like, this is what I think we can do. These are all my ideas. Please let me work here. And within a month, I was promoted to the bilingual services cultivator, which in that role, I really understood, like, I've been just getting bored in my roles. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And this role helped me do it all. I got to work with our telephony and engineering team to create a proprietary technology to route those calls. I got to work with HR and recruiting to discuss hiring strategy, and leadership and development to create training and onboarding. And it just was also a great experience because the role connected me to my heritage. And I felt like it was not only good for the community to take these Spanish speaking calls, but it was like mutually beneficial for Ruby. So after really upholding the service and kind of letting it Thrive, I got to step into a services department manager role where I got to help other leaders learn to become better leaders and help their hundreds of direct reports, which can be a very stressful role, but also it was a really great opportunity to lean into project management. So it wasn't just leading leaders, it was creating a new service quality measurement. It was rolling out a new program policy. So the change management that I had to learn and had to become comfortable with was just astronomical. So even though I obsessed about Ruby and grew so much there, I met a consultant coincidentally, and they asked me about my career journey. I talked about all this stuff that I'm talking to you about. And they said, you know what? I think you have the right amount of moxie and experience to become a consultant, which I had never even heard of before. So I literally had to go home and Google it so I wouldn't look stupid. Um, and I realized, wow, that's a job. And I think that I could do that job. So I started looking at companies and organizations and realized there are different kinds of consulting firms. And the one that you're going to recognize this pattern, but I became obsessed with Propeller too. So I started reading their articles, I started reading their blogs, I was all over their LinkedIn, and realized I really want this job, but I had pre-imposter syndrome and didn't think I could cut it and held off for years until I really spent time actually crafting my career journey, and with the consulting mentality, realizing I've been doing internal consulting throughout my entire career. I have a shot at this job. I'm going to take my shot. And here I am. I got hired. I'm crushing it. So I hear. But, took my experience of rolling out a training and enablement program in my very first role for, 10 people to now recently in the last project was for 10,000. So you do have transferable skills. You do have stuff that you can sell yourself and make sure that you craft the right story. So yeah, that's me.
Rosie, I have a quick follow-up question for you. When you were considering how to communicate your moxie and experience in a way that made sense for the consulting industry, what were some, one, how did you think about that? And two, what were some resources that you used to kind of help you craft that into a cohesive narrative?
I did a ton of research. So I looked at what consulting firms actually were looking for. I had no idea what a business case was. So I was like, I got to start studying this business cases. And I think through reading business cases, especially the ones that are on Propeller's website, I started to realize oh my gosh, I've literally done some of these things. These things that they're saying, these are what our consultants have done. I have in my experience. So that helped me start to look through my history and craft the stories, especially the ones that were related that I thought Propeller would also see in themselves. And that was a helpful way for me.
Rosie, I just had another follow-up question for you. So clearly a lifelong learner as you continue to explore and progress in your career path. You did some research online, so I was curious if you had some specific resources or recommendations as people are continuing to explore. A lot of on-the-job learning, of course, but maybe what are some of those external resources you might recommend to people as well?
Yes. So I actually wrote a blog about my career journey, which is on Propeller's website and on LinkedIn. And it has the specific resources there because I didn't memorize them and I should have written them down. But there is a book called Getting Naked that helped me understand what kind of consultant I wanted to be, but also that there are different kinds of firms. And it made me realize I want to work at a specific kind of firm with specific kind of consultants. So that was a really great book. I also took a lot of LinkedIn learning courses around, just problem solving and strategic thinking. And a lot of them were by a consultant named Mike Figuli. If someone's Italian, please don't make fun of me. I don't know how to pronounce his name. But those are also really great resources.
Thank you. Oh, perfect. There we go. Blog post. Thank you, Drew.
I had a quick question. What was your interview process like getting the job? Did you have to do a case study analysis in front of a group of people?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So Propeller has a 4-step interview process, if I remember right. The first interview was very, light. It was more, I think they were trying to see, like, would you be a good fit at the company? What kind of consultant do you want to be? What's your background? And they kind of got a little bit more difficult as it progressed. In each one, there was kind of like a mini case, like a little problem solving, not necessarily the business cases that I had been reading about, like how many light bulbs are there in the US, which is good that they didn't ask me. It was more around like, here's an actual business problem. So there are things like that. And then the final round is more of like a presentation. I believe I got a business case. It was like a sheet that I got to read and understand. I got an hour to prepare a presentation on how I would fix the problem. And then I got to do the presentation itself, where I was asked questions.
Thank you, Rosie. I think we would like to invite our next speaker, Serena, and there'll be more time for questions at the end, but I would like to invite Serena to share her story.
All right. Thank you, Jody. And thank you, Rosie. You're a hard act to follow, but I will try. I'm Serena. I'm a director at Propeller, and I have a similar situation where it was a very untraditional career path. I knew learning was really important to me, learning and development. So as a college student, I thought, well, then you become a teacher, right? So I did student teaching, and nothing taught me more that I did not want to be a teacher than doing student teaching with high schoolers. So I was like, oh no, I don't know what to do. So I remember sitting down with the vice president of my university in this like career crisis, like, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. I love learning. I love being in a learning environment, but I can't be a teacher. And she's like, well, guess what? My job's a job. I was like, your job's a job. How do I get your job? So then I went and I got my master's in education and adult learning with the pursuit of becoming a vice president of university. And so I worked in all of kind of the operational areas outside of the classroom in a university. So I did academic accommodations for students with disabilities, housing, leadership development, orientation, campus tours, parent programs, alumni relations, fundraising, I mean, all over the place. And even in higher education, you have people that specialize in certain areas, like they do judicial affairs their whole career. They do orientation their whole career. I was quite the opposite. I wanted to be a generalist and have operational knowledge of all of the areas that eventually would report to me if I was a vice president. Then the president of a university I was working at asked me to consider the role of vice president. And I was like, oh, I don't want this. I don't want this anymore at all. I know what questions I'm going to deal with and issues I'm going to deal with every fall, every spring. I can't do this. And so nothing tells you you got to go quicker than when you tell a president, no, thanks. So then you start your career search. So I was doing informational interviews and really focusing in learning and development in companies, like in corporations. And I was like, I was figuring it out, healthcare, this is interesting. And then I learned about consulting. And actually one of the people on this call who's sitting in and watching, she walked the position description for Propeller into my office and said, I think this is you. And I read it and I literally got goosebumps and I was like, I need to work here. I need this job. How do I get this job? So I applied, and thank God Jody saw my untraditional resume in the stack and pulled me out and said, I think this girl should get a first interview. And as I went through the process, what I learned was I wanted Propeller more and more after every interview. I also was learning that my instincts were right. Like the things that I was doing and I was learning in education were right. And I'm going to say a controversial thing, but a university is a business, and they have consumers, they're, they're students, they have stakeholders, they're your deans and your faculty, So I was doing a lot of the same stuff. It was just in a very different environment, and it happened to be a nonprofit. So I was learning my instincts were right, but also, and similar to Rosie, as I was preparing for that final interview, the business case, I was Googling business cases. Like, I've never taken one business class in my life. So what is project management? What is change management? Like, I didn't know these words. And so I was also learning that I had to code switch, because while my instincts were right, my words were so confusing and way off. And so I was Googling stuff, but I also then completed my PMP, so my certification in project management during the interview process, so that one, I could make more sense to the interviewers at Propeller, so I could get the job, but also so that I could demonstrate some expertise to our clients that ultimately need to choose us to help solve their problems on the client side, right? So I needed to make my resume make more sense to my clients, where I had to do a lot of that code switching, even on that paper resume, to make it switch from orientation to onboarding and, students to client, consumers. So that is my journey, and then have been doing change management since I've been at Propeller. And I've been always in global retailers in my time. And the change management, though, has been quite varied. Human resources, talent acquisition, diversity and inclusion, crisis management, retail training. So doing a lot of change management, large scale, and then have, like Jody mentioned, switched into the director role more recently, where it has consulting, performance management. So I have a team of consultants that I performance manage, and then also work on business development. So that is my wild journey to consulting.
Thank you, Serena. I love the adventure. Coming from higher education, it's always exciting to hear the great story. You overcame, much like Rosie, several different hurdles, and as you were continuing to learn and explore and kind of figure out what that next step was going to look like for you. You mentioned, having to code switch and kind of get over that hurdle as you were stepping into Propeller. But once on the other side, what do you consider, what was that first great accomplishment that you were like, yes, I know that I'm here, I'm in the right place, I made the right decision? Oh,
thank you, Jody. Dory, that's a good question. One of my biggest pieces of advice to consultants as they start their new roles is get a win, get a big win at the beginning. And I feel really lucky that I got a big win at the beginning, because then it just gives you a lot of runway. You establish trust with your client, and then they open the door for more interesting and exciting work. So I was helping to change a hiring process for a global retailer, to layer in changes to their process to increase the number of women and people of color in their leadership roles. So it was big, exciting work, and coming from education, which frankly is far ahead of the game from corporations when it comes to D&I. So I felt like I was bringing some expertise in that area, but I knew one of the asks was I needed to lead a 3-day training for all of their talent acquisition people. They were going to fly them in for this 3-day training on the changes to the hiring process. And they were like, we only have 3 weeks. You got to do it. Can you do it in 3 weeks? And I was like, yeah, that's just like running orientation, but everybody's majoring in the same thing. This is so easy. I used to have to run orientation with 115 different majors, and you've got to figure out how to get them all their unique information. What, you all need to know the same thing? Awesome. So what I did was I figured out who were the internal people that had the influence and had the power. And what I did was I asked the managers of the people and said, who are your recruiters and your sourcers that are really well respected? They gave me a list. Then I went to the recruiters and sourcers and I was like, who are your peers that you really listen to? They gave me a list. Cross-referenced those two lists to find who overlapped. I then set up a meeting with them and I was like, these are my orientation leaders. So I was like, I need you all to help me build out these 3 days. You're going to be my experts. You're going to deliver the presentation. So I built the 3 days worth of presentations with those people, and then did public speaking training with them, and then got them ready to get on the stage, and then they delivered it. And I just got to sit in the back and, do applause. And so it was very much, I ran a 3-day orientation, but they all had the same major. So it was much easier than I was used to.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Serena. Now we'd like to hear a different version of a career story from another of our consultants, Lisa Payne, who, unlike Rosie and Serena, came to Propeller with lots of years of experience in consulting before joining the firm. So Lisa, I would like to invite you to share your story.
Yes. Hi, I'm Lisa Payne. I'm a consultant with Propeller Consulting. And yes, I have essentially been a career management consultant. I enjoy a dynamic work environment. I love to be challenged constantly. And, selfishly, I'm always growing and learning, and that is important to me. And throughout my career, I've had a couple things that have really anchored and grounded me in terms of what I'm looking for, and what the next thing has been, and how I've found different firms. So ultimately, I love problem solving and working with people. And 2 questions I ask myself is, am I challenged? Am I growing? And then secondly, am I making a difference? And does that difference really matter? So making sure that because I came to work and I was challenged, that someone else is also benefiting from that. And I actually interned in industry at a healthcare company, and we were working on SAP implementation, and there was a consulting firm there, and they would kind of also take me aside and, you should really interview with us. And I ultimately got offers from both of those, went somewhere else. But what I learned there was I enjoyed the idea of consulting, to go in, do some projects, and move on to the next thing, and have that variety of industry. So I worked over 9 years in Big Four consulting with a couple different firms, and it was a great place for my early career days. I worked across a variety of industries, functions and practices, working through implementations, process improvement, technology strategy, customer relationship management, operating models, compliance. I even applied and received opportunity to go into the Global Development Program in London, where I worked for 2 years. So it was a really great run, and I would not disparage Big Four consulting, but for me, I became a manager, and I was able to work abroad, but I didn't want to do the partner track. And I was also becoming limited in terms of staying with a certain industry or a certain practice area. And around that time, I had an opportunity to join more of a startup in the e-discovery space, and I managed large multifunctional teams, supporting legal counsel and law firms related to e-discovery and litigation and responsive review. So it was a great opportunity as well, more from a professional services standpoint. Later moved into some other consulting roles as independent, as well as with another boutique consulting firm. Worked mainly in healthcare, technology, and financial services. I enjoyed the work that I was doing. I was continuing to be challenged and making a difference. But what I missed was belonging to a sense of firm or having a work family. And so I really missed that. And then I was drawn to Propeller. And through my interview process, I really enjoyed the people I interviewed with, learning about the type of work. And it is actually true in terms of coming on board. I've really enjoyed the work that I'm doing. I'm challenged, I'm growing. I feel like I'm making a difference. I'm working in change management, so I'm constantly working with people, solving problems. It definitely matters to them, making a difference. And I found a home in terms of having a broader firm, and we do work outside of our client work, and that's meaningful to me. So for example, I work on an initiative related to our DEI at the firm. So it's really interesting to me to do something that I'm passionate about. And I also do pro bono consulting. So Propeller is really giving me the opportunity not only to do meaningful client work that's challenging and rewarding and makes a difference, but also other things that are closer to my heart and certain passions. So that is my story.
Thank you, Lisa. I love those guiding questions of that you seem to have carried throughout your entire career. Are you challenged and are you making a difference? That's awesome. So you've had all of these experiences at all these different kinds of consulting firms, and I'd love it if we could hear like an example of one of your favorite projects and what makes it stick out in your mind, or what was special about it.
So I think, I have to say the one I'm working on now is pretty exciting because it is related to going back to work kind of in this post or even during coronavirus, and how do we manage that change for people. And so because it is so in the press and it's so dynamic and we don't have answers, but how do you manage people through those kinds of changes? How do you get a cross-functional team aligned on how to respond to that? So it's challenging, it's dynamic. We're forging a course. There is no precedent for this. So it's creative problem solving, which I love. And it matters to people. This is their livelihood. This is their sense of feeling safe and healthy. And what can we do to help them through that journey? So it's problem solving, it's working in a very ambiguous environment and working with people and making a difference. And that's why it's probably one of my favorite projects.
Thank you, Lisa. Very relevant project for sure.
Yes.
Next, I would like to have Brianna share her career story up till today, and then we'll go from there.
Hi, everybody. So I am a little bit more similar to Rosie and Serena's background in that I have a pretty unconventional career background. I actually come from the counterterrorism, law and policy, crisis management world. I started my career, working at a terrorism research center as a terrorism analyst, sorting through and identifying perps of global terrorist attacks and helping to create what is now kind of a one-of-a-kind database globally that folks can access regarding historical terrorist attacks. From there, I moved into more of the transnational crime work and developing kind of profiles of groups and organizations to understand how they behave. And so I got to do more of a deep dive on people, behavior, understanding motivations in that role, and looking into their capacity for potential future attacks. So it was kind of trying to think about how they may act versus kind of the historical work that I did. So it required a lot of strategic thinking, predictions, recommendations, and then kind of briefing our executives on any of the threats that we thought would be possible or could encounter. While I was at the research center, I actually had an opportunity to join the training development team. So I thought I could do this side project and, just see where it takes me. But I ended up really liking it. So I was working with experts in the industry to develop training courses for cyber threat mitigation, the terror crime nexus. And I thought it was really fun to take this very complex bits of information and translating it for the general public and creating content for folks, keeping my audience in mind. We ended up reaching about 20,000 folks across the globe who were our students. And so taking that project from beginning to end was a lot of fun. After START, I went to the Treasury Department and dabbled in like anti-money laundering type work, again working with folks across the globe, but mainly in South America, who were kind of petitioning their case with the United States on whether they would get their assets blocked if they were tied to a criminal organization. And so my role there was actually working with our petitioners to understand their case and doing research on the back end as well, and then making recommendations to our executives on whether we'd be able to remove them and give them access to their assets again and kind of get them re-engaged with society. So I really enjoyed the aspect. I had a case about 30 folks, and so getting to work with them directly, different people in different situations, and helping them kind of achieve their goal along the way was a lot of fun. So from there, I did a 180 and jumped into management consulting, honestly thinking it would be temporary, but I never left. That was 7+ years ago, and here I am. I have no business background, no formal business degree, but I found that my past experience in kind of, working on various cases is kind of like working on various projects. And I got to dig through data. You're doing research, you're figuring out. Sometimes people don't even know what their problem is. And so as consultants, we come in thinking we're solving X, but really the problem is Y. And we need to figure out how do we solve for Y, right? But also the people aspect that the panelists have also mentioned, getting to create content for stakeholders and understanding who they are, their behaviors and motivations, and using that to be receptive to them, to be able to resonate with them, whether that's creating communications for them or providing recommendations to business leaders of various organizations on how maybe they should move forward with their strategic business plans, if they've got a transformation project, how they want to approach that. And so I took all of that experience from my counterterrorism days, and I hope have turned out to be a great consultant, because like I said, I've been doing it now for 7+ years, but was really able to leverage some of that unconventional experience in my current job today. So that's a little bit about me. I joined Propeller in December of last year. And so now have been almost just short of my year mark. And when I joined Propeller, I actually got to explore different industries that I'd never worked in before. We mentioned earlier that we've got retail clients, healthcare clients, utility clients. My past work has been mainly in the public sector, so with government organizations, nonprofits, higher education. And so I find a lot of joy in learning as I go, like Lisa mentioned, learning new industries, learning how businesses work behind the scenes, and helping to solve problems across these various industries. I find that to be really, really fun. So that's a little bit about me and my journey.
Amazing. Thank you, Brianna. Well, Propeller is lucky to have you. Happy almost 1-year anniversary. We'll have to do a shout out here later. So you joined management consulting and you never left. So clearly we're winning there. But I'm curious just if you had any kind of insights. Obviously, you were probably exploring a few different opportunities at the time. So what was it for you for Propeller that said, ooh, this is my right next step. This is where I want to be?
Yeah, so honestly, I felt through my interview experience that this was a place that I could be myself, but that also found value in kind of my varied background experiences, and could tell that that would actually be of benefit to our current clients today. I recall, in an interview process or in an interview conversation, somebody mentioning how, having this bit of security investigations background could really serve well for some of our current clients today. And so I felt valued in those initial conversations. And I felt like, again, I could be myself. I don't have to pretend to be the MBA graduate, which is a great path, but it wasn't mine. And so that really made Propeller stand out to me, and made me, this be a place that I wanted to be at.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brianna. And finally, I'd like to introduce Martin, who is going to share about his career journey to Propeller today.
Thanks, Jody. Hi, everyone. My name is Martin Echeverria, or Martin, for those that speak Spanish. My last name is hard to pronounce, so don't worry about that. You can just call me Martin. And so great to see so many of you on Zoom. So I'll share a little bit about my career background. I would consider myself probably a career consultant, but my career definitely did not start in consulting. It started very far away from consulting, I would say. So I went to school and got my undergrad for chemical engineering, which is about probably as far away as you can get from consulting. And to be honest, when I was an undergrad, I didn't really know what it meant to be an engineer. No one really told me you had to be good at fixing equipment or good with, using your hands. And I can barely fix my own light bulb. So I got into engineering and, got a job with an engineering firm and worked as a production engineer for 2 years, and really just struggled with it because of the fact that I wasn't good at fixing mechanical equipment. And when someone told me I had to fix a reactor outlet valve, I was like, what is that? And I'm sure most of you are like, yeah, what is that? I have no idea. So that was not the career for me, and I figured that out pretty quickly. But I loved solving problems. I just wasn't good at using my hands to solve problems. So I had a little bit of like introspection and thinking about what it is that I wanted to do. And something that always appealed to me was the variety of things that you can do in consulting, because consulting is so broad. There's so many different things you can do. You can do change management, experience design, product management. It's a vast realm of things that fall under this consulting umbrella. So for me, not really knowing exactly what I wanted to do, I decided I want to be able to try out different things as long as I'm able to solve problems, because that's what I enjoy doing. And it was also great that I didn't have to use my hands to fix any equipment, because that wasn't going to work out for me. So I made the transition to Accenture, which is where I started my consulting career about three and a half years ago now. And Accenture was a great place to start my consulting career, because I got to work with a variety of different clients. But I always felt a little bit disconnected with just how big of a company it was. And it wasn't really, the politics and the hierarchy wasn't something that I was exactly looking for. I got to do some great stuff while I was there. I was in their digital business and helped many clients transform their businesses into really the 21st century, helping them stand up cloud-based tools like Salesforce and things like that. And it was a great start to my career. But like I said, I wanted something where I felt like I was part of a family. And that's when I started to look, and really Propeller called to me because of the sense of family that I got as I was going through the interviews. While I was going through the interviews, there was a variety of different people that I spoke to, from consultants to directors to managing directors, and everyone really felt like they were very welcoming and wanted you to be part of the Propeller family. And I love that. I'd never gotten that in any other company. And something that was always important to me, that I didn't get in my previous consulting career, was to be able to have some work-life balance. And I know a big stigma prior to me coming into consulting was that consulting is known for lack of work-life balance. And something that I loved about Propeller as I was going through the interview process, that it was very clear to me that work-life balance was important. So that's kind of a brief career journey for me. And I just want to say, since I've started at Propeller, which was at the beginning of this year, I've been able to be on 2 very different but exciting engagements, and with clients in areas that I hadn't worked at before. And now that I actually do have some work-life balance, I've actually had the opportunity to go back to school to pursue an MBA, as well as being able to get involved in internal initiatives at Propeller, which is something that in my previous consulting career, I just wouldn't have had the opportunity to do. So.
Awesome. Well, congrats on all the work that you've done so far, Martin. That's wonderful. And going back to school, talk about a bonus work-life balance. You really are balancing it and education too. I love it. Well, a follow-up question. So you had mentioned, you know, in part of your next step in your journey of joining Propeller was like looking for a family, and family can be, you know, pros and cons. And sometimes there are hurdles that come with that, right? So I'm curious, what were maybe kind of one of those hurdles that you just said, oh, I need to get over this, or this is one of those challenges that you needed to kind of work through, but obviously very rewarding on the other side?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I think one of the most, I guess one of the biggest changes for me, I wouldn't necessarily call it a challenge, but one of the biggest changes for me was going from an organization of 500,000 people to one of 150. And 500,000 people, you're bound to have someone that has done something similar to what you've done. But the process to find that person is daunting. And one of the biggest, I guess, changes for me coming to Propeller is that 150 people, someone has probably done something similar to what you've done before, but you just have to ask. And sometimes it's not, you don't really realize that there are people at Propeller that have done what you've done before if you just ask. So I think that was probably one of the most difficult, or maybe one of the biggest changes for me.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Awesome. Well, I think we only have time for a few questions, but I'd love to invite any of our guests today who have a question for one or more of our panelists. You are welcome to ask your question or put it in the chat box either way.
I have a question. Hi, I'm Jessica Plant. I'm like not sure you can, am I highlighted or not, but my question is basically the internal workings of Propeller. So I'm kind of curious because when people get together on Zoom, it's really easy to think about everyone working super independently. But I'm sort of wondering how much of the work you do around your projects is team-based, how much is independent, and then the hierarchical structure of Propeller itself, whether or not it's very flat organizationally, or how you would describe Propeller, the inner workings of the organization.
I can take that. So great question. Thank you, Jessica. We do have both. So there are definitely situations where we have consultants that are individuals out solving problems and embedded in teams with other people. We also have team engagements where they're going out as a team. Maybe you have an experienced designer, project manager, change manager that are going out and solving the problem together. As we continue to grow, we continue to prioritize, and demand right now is just so high. We have way more work coming in than we have consultants to fill the work right now. It's just a great problem to have. So as we are prioritizing our work, we're prioritizing more of those team engagements because it's great for the consultants. They get a chance to work with other fellow Propellerites that they enjoy working with, but it also is a big win for the client as well, because then they're able to deal with one point of contact. We're able to strategize together to solve a problem, as opposed to going around and like, we'll do our own retrospectives and things like that. So we're doing both, but as we continue to evolve and grow, I would say we're probably shifting a bit more to the team. And then I'm missing the second part of the question, so maybe one of the other panelists has that one.
I believe it was around hierarchy, Serena, which as the director out of these panelists, I thought it would be best for you to answer.
Oh, sorry, I missed what it was. We actually, sorry, thank you, Rosie, for bringing the question back to my brain. Yeah, we have been very flat in our structure, and I think something that's amazing about Propeller is as we grow, we lean on our consultants and their expertise to understand what's next. And so we had actually a team of internal consultants serve as consultants for us to figure out how do we evolve as an organization, and it was called Org of the Future work to understand what is right for us in the market for our consultants. And so we have started to build in some additional layers so that we could see more career progression. Because what was happening is consultants are like, there's consultant, and then there's, kind of the senior leadership team. And so they were wanting more career progression. And so we're seeing that some in the director path, like I have done, which includes, like I've said, some business development, performance management, and consulting. And then we've also have some practice areas where those are building out. And then we also have principal consultants where they are expert consultants, but they don't want to do the business development and performance management. So we do have, and then we also have internal teams where they like Jody and Dory and Julia and Drew on this call. Those are some internal teams where they have their own internal structure as well. So very quick answer to that.
Thanks so much.
All right, and I see that we have a lot of people raised hands. Sorry, we don't have enough time to get to everyone's questions. But, I think the first hand raised was from Subi, if you want to ask your question.
All right. Hi, I'm Subi. Not sure how to remove my hand raised there, but I'm also in Portland. So hello, Portlanders. So I have a couple of questions, I guess. I'm also new to understanding what consulting is. And like Rosie said, I think I'm having an epiphany right now that I have been doing consulting my entire career unintentionally. So my question is, how long do these assignments last? Do you have one client at a time? Is the project like a 6-month project that you're doing something for a client? Is it as quickly as it can get done? What does that time frame look like? And do you have multiple clients at one time?
I can take that. I think it really varies from project to project. There are some like quick turnarounds, like Serena mentioned, she had 3 weeks to do something. And that could be a really short time frame. But there could be year-long engagements. It really is driven by the client's needs. And even then, you could sign up for 3 months and then they say, wow, you're awesome. We love you. We want to keep working with you. Extend your contract for like another 3 months or another 6 months. So yeah, it really varies.
I believe the other part of that question was about number of projects at a time. And typically our consultants are just working with one client at a time. Sometimes there's an additional client they might have, like a pro bono consulting project on the side, but typically they're kind of fully embedded in one project at a time. All right, we have a few kind of closing things. And again, I apologize that we weren't able to get to everybody's questions, but we do have an opportunity for you to learn a little bit more if you are interested in asking some additional questions. We did just want to highlight that we are hiring at Propeller. We have lots of roles available, 4 different types of consultant positions, as well as a few of the internal positions, and we're hiring in all of our geos. So if you are interested in joining Propeller, please look at our website and at these job openings. And some other next steps. We have a interview quick guide. So if you want to learn a little bit more about interviewing at Propeller, interviewing at consulting firms, or interviewing in general, we have this resource. Drew just dropped the link in the chat. We will also be sending a follow-up email that has that link. I already talked about exploring our open career opportunities on our website, but there's lots of other information on the careers page and on our website as well. And then if you are interested in asking some additional questions about careers in consulting and careers at Propeller, I would invite you to connect with a few of my colleagues that we've heard from today. So on the next slide here, we have contact information for Julia and Dory. And we divide ourselves kind of by geography. So if you are interested in opportunities in Portland or Denver, I encourage you to reach out to Julia and schedule a quick time to learn more. If you're interested in roles in San Francisco or Silicon Valley, please reach out to Dory, and either of them would be happy to schedule a time to tell you more about Propeller. So I think that concludes our time today. Thank you so much for attending today, and we hope that you learned a little bit about how to craft your own career story. As we heard from our presenters today, everybody has a unique story, and there's lots of different ways to get into management consulting. So hopefully you learned something along the way, and we really appreciate your time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Rosie, you look beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.